So for our second talk, another excellent speaker lined up, and that's Hélène Thibault, who's going to be talking to us about micronectin diel vertical migration and carbon fluxes. So Hélène, over to you.
Thank you. Just let me share my screen. Up. Okay. Um, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it fine. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So, hi everyone. I'm Hélène Thibault, a PhD student working at the MIO in France. And I'm going to talk about a recently submitted study about modeling the contribution of micronectin diel vertical migrations to carbon export in the mesopelagic zone. So just to give a brief introduction to contextualize this study, as most of you must be familiar with, the carbon pump is composed of different pathways. So the most important one is a gravitational pump that you can see here. So basically, phytoplankton will produce carbon detritus as well as a higher trophic level. And these particles aggregate and sink to depth. Another important pathway is the particle injection pumps, which can be physical, also biological, due to vertical migrators. So composed of zooplankton and micronectin that feed at the surface and goes at depth during the day, where they inject directly particles. So the gravitational pump contributes to 9 pentagram of carbon per year. And as a comparison, the migrant pump contributes to 3.6 pentagram of carbon per year, with a sequestration time of approximately 250 years. So most of studies include zooplankton in a carbon budget, but we know little about micronectin contribution to this carbon pump, at least that should have an important contribution due to their larger size. They have greater swimming abilities, allowing them to go deeper at depth and injecting larger and fast sinking particles. They also have a longer gut transit, so allowing them to have the time to go at depth and then reject their particles. So two recent studies using so global models using different approaches suggest that there is a contribution of fish and zooplankton to the carbon flux. So micronectin organisms are composed of fish, crustaceans like large decapods and cephalopods, also gelatinous organisms, which I will not talk about. They measure between 2 and 20 centimeters. Most of them are bioluminescent and feed on plankton. So mostly at the surface, where they have large interactions between prey and predators, and that decrease with depth as their metabolic rates. So these species are subject to strong environmental gradients. This is due to the fact that they perform diel vertical migrations. So there are three main hypotheses explaining this phenomenon. First, they are hiding at depth from visual predators during the day. And then they get hungry and goes at the surface to feed on plankton. And again, goes at depth when the sun rises. Also, there's hypotheses where they're following an isolume or staying in a light comfort zone, which can explain their dynamics and so the timing of the migration during the crepuscular period. So now that we know of the model, that we developed to study the relative contribution of micronecton in the transport of carbon. So here we have a micronecton at the surface feeding on zooplankton and using visual predations, which is highly dependent on the level of light. So the capture rate are higher during the crepuscular periods, which are called here the feeding windows. They are performing vertical migrations. So in this model, it's triggered with surface region's rate of change, which varies with latitude, seasons, and of course the hour of the day. And the migration dynamic depends on size of the organism and their taxonomy group. Here are represented as cephalopod, mesopelagic fish, and shrimps. So they continuously, through their metabolic activity, produce carbon. So dissolved inorganic carbon by respiration and also particulate organic carbon through the digestion of fecal pellets and dead bodies. And this metabolic activity depends on temperature, depth, size, and their taxonomy. Here we can see a general equation of their metabolism. So where growth is equal to the ingest minus the metabolic loss, so representing by respiration, the ejection of fecal pellets, and the dead bodies. So I will not explain in details every equations, but just for you to know that it's a quite simple model with a limited amount of parameters. So the idea is not to fully represent the complexity of the ecosystem, but to test hypotheses. So we have three state variables composed of plankton, the resource of micronecton, the micronecton guts, and the micronecton biomass. So here we have the resource with the growth term and the predation by micronecton. So this corresponds to the ingestion that is then transferred to the gut. A part of it is assimilated for the growth, minus so the metabolic losses and the mortality, and the rest is adjusted as fecal pellets. So these parameters depend as possible on size and taxonomic groups, so including fish, crustacean, and cephalopod. And there is no interaction between the groups. So we use that model to test different scenarios to answer mainly two questions. How the size and taxonomy influence the efficiency of carbon export by micronecton, and how the environment variability impacts their transport of carbon. So here on this figure, you can see the production of carbon by micronecton along depth. So for fish, crustacean, and cephalopod. On the top, it's a production of fats, and the bottom, it's the respiration. So here, one curve of one color corresponds to one simulation, which means that only one simulation represents one taxonomic group of a given size. So we can see here that there are two peaks of carbon production, one at the surface, where they reside during the night, and at depth, where they reside during the day. So we can see that they have different swimming abilities depending on size, where larger organism goes deeper, and the taxonomy. So fish have greater swimming abilities than cephalopod and crustacean. Then if we integrate the carbon production along depth, we can see clearly that fish produce more carbon by respiration, and dead bodies than the two other groups. And that smaller individuals produce relatively more carbon due to their more active metabolism. Also represented the P ratio, which represent the efficiency of carbon transport in the mesopelagic zone. So it's the integration of the POC production under 200 meters divided by the primary production. So we can see that there is an intermediate size showing the highest carbon transport efficiency. So this is due to the fact that, as I said, smaller organisms have a more active metabolism, so they more carbon, but also they have less swimming abilities, and some of them, like small crustaceans, don't even reach the mesopelagic zone, so they can't contribute to the transport of carbon. Now, if you looked at the relative carbon production by taxonomic group, so we have respiration, fecal pellets, and dead body. Here, the box plot variability is due to the size of the organism. So we can see that there are different ways to mobilize carbon between the three groups. So for the respiration, it represents 50% of the carbon production by fish, 40% for crustaceans, and 60% for cephalopods. On the other hand, they produce a low amount of fecal pellets, around 10%, which is higher for crustaceans and a bit less for fish. For dead bodies, for every group, it's around 30%, with a high variation of carbon production by respiration and also dead bodies. So these three groups will not participate to the biological pump in the same way, as they don't produce the same amount of dissolved inorganic carbon and also particulate organic carbon. So after that, I was interested to know how the metabolic parameters have an impact on the estimation of carbon production and transport. So we performed a sensitivity analysis based on sample indices computed for the three different outputs of each taxonomy groups. So on the top for the P ratio, which is, as we said, the efficiency of carbon transport under 200 meters, the POC production along the water column, and the ton biomass. We can see that there are similarities between the group the model outputs, but it's interesting to see what are the differences between them. So first, we can see that the respiration coefficient, which are represented here, so they are coefficient in an empirical equation to estimate respiration. So they're highly sensitive for every group and every model estimations. When we have the A-swim coefficients, which directly impact the swimming speed of the organism. And this parameter is highly sensitive regarding P ratio, especially for crustaceans, which we watch that they have less swimming abilities, and so that this coefficient might impact their abilities to go into the mesopelagic zone and so participate to the active export of carbon. And the assimilation coefficient that has an impact mainly for crustaceans and cephalopods on the POC production. So now, if you looked at the impact seasons and environment variability on the carbon transport, study environment was set at the PAPSO, which is an observatory in the Atlantic Northeast. They are composed of primary production, temperature, and light that change seasonally. This environment will have direct impacts on the growth of the organism, their metabolic rates, the capture efficiency, and the speed. We can see on this figure the production of carbon along death by plankton, including respiration, fecal pellets, and dead bodies for each season of the year. So we can see that there is a more important production of carbon in summer and also at deeper depth, so where they reside during the day, which could be explained by the fact that there is an effect of daylight variability with primary production affecting capture rates and migration speed. So indeed, during spring, when the primary production is higher, because of the turbid waters, micronecton are less efficient in capturing the prey, which can explain their lower abundance and so production of carbon. So as a comparison to our findings, the winter carbon production is similar to estimates under oligotrophic conditions Pacific, and the summer carbon production estimates close to those in productive region, so based on the study of Bianchi and his colleagues. To conclude, I'd like to say that I think there is an importance in taking into account both the size and taxonomic group when estimating the migrant pomp, and more understand what are the and to reduce the uncertainties, as well for the estimation, notably of respiration rates, which are also crucial to reduce those uncertainties, and that there is a need for seasonal in situ sampling for model validation, even in open ocean, where there are environment variability and so in the carbon flux, and of course in light with climate change. Want to have more details about this study? The preprint is currently available for open discussions in Peru Geoscience, and I'll be happy to answer if you have any questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hélène. Another excellent talk. So lots to think about there. So once again, if people, you can either raise your electronic hand, you can type a question, anything you want. If you have a question that you'd like to ask Hélène, let me just take a look at the chat and see if we've got anything. So I have a question. Apologies if I've missed this. So you've looked at how the flux varies across the sort of the group. So you've got, you know, the cephalopods, you've got the, you know, the crustacean, etc. What extra effect is there on the distribution of those organisms? So I'm guessing that if you looked at a global distribution of, say, cephalopods, then it doesn't exactly match that you'd see in terms of crustaceans. So what impact does that geographical distribution of the organisms have if you wanted to sort of sum this up in terms of to understand what it happens in terms of, you know, the global flux?
Do you mean the distribution at a global scale or in the vertical?
Actually, sort of horizontally at the global scale, in terms of, you know, I've seen sort of images in terms of, I mean, this was sort of more in terms of jellyfish, in terms of how, you know, there are areas where you're more likely to find jellyfish than others. And I just wondered how that affected estimates of sort of the global carbon flux associated with this diel migration.
Okay. So yeah, of course, it's difficult to estimate what the relative abundance of each group, but as I saw in few studies, you have a related abundance with fish that are composed of 70% of micronecton, large crustaceans, maybe 20%, cephalopod 10%. So I used this relative abundance at least to represent their related contribution to the carbon flux and made their abundance at the global scale. It's mostly with models based on satellite data, the transfer of biomass between the primary production and micronecton. But it's hard to know because here I'm presenting only the DL vertical migrators, but we have a lot of other behaviors and still a lot of things to understand.
Yeah. I mean, I was tempted to ask you a question about diapause as well, where you have the migration taking over sort of, longer periods. But yeah, I mean, that might have been unfair, bearing in mind you've been focused on the dial migration. But I mean, do you think the same principles apply?
I'm not really studying this aspect, but of course it's important to take into account mostly if we regard the annual variation of the organism. But we need to know which type of species have this type of behavior. And we know, I don't think we know enough about micronecton to completely understand how this can impact at least carbon flux.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, very much an open
Sorry,
question.
I don't have many
No,
answers.
at all, not at all. I mean, I don't know the answer myself. I'm just fascinating to hear your perspective on things. So if anybody does have another question, then please call out. I can't see anything in the chat. Once again, I'm sure that Hélène would be happy to answer any questions you have. Oh, here we go. So Charlotte, do you want to ask a question? Charlotte, you can open your microphone and ask, or I could read it out, whichever you prefer. Okay, maybe I'll read it out. So the question is, would you expect differences in physiological parameters depending on the latitudinal location of the organisms modelled? And how would that affect the output of the model? Okay.
Yes, thank you for your question. So as I represented only at one location, but it's also the same environmental variables that will affect across the latitude. So of course, the temperature, if it's higher or lower latitude, will impact the metabolic rates. And also the primary productions and the light, even if, for example, in high latitudes, if you have a really long period of daylight, it will have an impact of the organism because they can't definitely a death hiding from the light. So yeah, they need to find other strategy in order to survive and predators, but still have enough food to maintain their biomass.
Excellent. So thank you very much. Thank you to both our speakers, both to Hélène and Precious, who unfortunately had to leave us for another meeting. Please join us again next month when we will hopefully have another couple of calls. But otherwise, thank you all very much for joining us, and please do check out the other talks that we have online. Thank you.
Bye.